Okay, and we will begin recording now. And again, my name is Savannah Haverfield, and I am the Community Relations Representative here at University House Issaquah. Our speaker today is Kelli Young. Kelli has more than 3 decades of experience in the investment and insurance industries on the individual and institutional level. Through her collaborative approach, Kelli provides comprehensive financial planning and investment management advice with a focus on retirement and longevity planning. With that, I will turn it over to you, Kelli.
Welcome, and thank you so much for coming. I am going to bring up the presentation. And again, hopefully, my intent today is that you all can gather some information and maybe a different way of thinking about retirement, whether you're already in retirement or know someone who is beginning that transition to support them, or you're within 10 years of retirement. This information really is designed to try and draw attention to a very different approach than what we're used to seeing. And as Savannah mentioned, that I'm a financial and wealth manager with Longevity Wealth, and I work in the Snoqualmie Valley where I live with my husband. And I really appreciate you guys being flexible with this webinar. Normally I'd be standing in this beautiful room talking with you all. And so although there's some benefits to you guys sitting on your kitchen table or your couch, and as well me in my office, it really takes a little more patience to attend a Zoom meeting, so I appreciate that. So today's presentation is called 8,000 Days, and retirement is often talked about as an end. It's the end of one's career, it's the last stage of your life, it's the end game, and you might be focused on how to prepare for retirement, which is critically important, but if you're looking at retirement as the final goal, then you might not be preparing in the best way. So this MIT Age Lab presentation is really helping us understand the dichotomy of retirement. And it is seen as an end, but it can actually make up for more than 1 decade or 2 decades of each of our lives. And so this presentation is designed to help you navigate those, what we call 8,000 days. And I did want to let you know as well that one of the benefits of me sitting in my office is that Chantel, who works with me in my office, is running the clicker to change the slides. So if during this presentation I mention her name or ask something of her, then it's because she's sharing this room with me and assisting me. So as we move on, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what the MIT Age Lab does. And so the MIT Age Lab, and hold on, I'm just having a little bit of trouble with the clicker in the next slide here. There we go. So this presentation was built from research from the MIT Age Lab. And the MIT Age Lab has been around since 1999, and it invents new ideas and creatively translates technology into practical solutions to improve people's health and to enable them to do more things throughout their lifespan. And this MIT Age Lab is based within the Engineers School of Engineering. And it really applies consumer-centered systems and thinking to understand the challenges and opportunities that we face throughout longevity, including emerging generational lifestyles. And this includes business markets. For example, one thing that the MIT Age Lab did that I found to be quite phenomenal when I began researching them is when you go to CVS pharmacies, you'll notice in often aisles that can be very tall or very difficult for things to reach on the bottom. And the MIT Age Lab developed what's called an Agnes suit. And it's an age gain suit that you put on, and you can literally dial it up 10 years, 20 years, or even 3 decades older. So a person, for example, me who's 50, can put on an age gain suit and be 30 years older and walk around the store. So CVS Pharmacy actually put their leaders into these suits, and they walked around the store in order to determine what was difficult when you're 80. And they found that it was difficult to bend over and get things on lower shelves, or they couldn't see over the aisles as to what they were trying to find. And even more so, they had to go all the way down the aisle in order to get to the other side of the aisle. So what CVS Pharmacy used with this MIT Age Lab research was chopping the aisles up into small components. Often you'll see small segments that might be related to one particular area that might interest someone who's aging. And they have removed quite a few of the lower shelves or components on the lower shelves, or items, I should say, that those products that people who are aging might be interested in. So this is all continuing to evolve, but the key is to really develop technologies that could help us in the future. And so I hope that you'll find some of this information helpful as well. This is from the director of the MIT Age Lab, Dr. Joe Coughlin. And what he states is that we have a longevity paradox. So now that we've achieved what human man has tried to achieve since it walked, living longer, we really don't have a good idea what to do with all that additional time. And so these are the three areas that we're going to cover today is what is the 8,000 days? How does it translate into these 4 stages of retirement and how to prepare for those stages? And in addition to these 3 items, I do want to add in another layer of just current economic news. Being an investment advisor and wealth manager and financial planner, I'm spending a lot of time, as you can imagine, sorting through what's going on in this current economic pandemic and financial crisis. And I think it's important to bring you guys up to speed on some of the things that I'm paying attention to. And then certainly you'll be able to ask questions throughout, as Savannah had mentioned. So life in the 8,000 days can be, through several segments. So the first segment is really, and this is all just about basic math. It has nothing to do with finances, but birth to college graduation is about 7,700 days, okay? Then you transition from college graduation to a midlife crisis, and again, about another 7,700 days. And then after that, midlife to retirement is about another 7,300 days, and we call that maturing, which we'll talk about. And then you add about another 8,000 days from retirement to end of life. And it's a very sharp contrast to how life was years ago, where retirement really was a very short segment of your life. So we're going to be exploring that last stage. People really have a phenomenal shot of living to 99. If you've ever visited one of the ERA communities, you will notice that it's not uncommon to reach people 80s, 90s, and 100. In fact, I've had a lot of clients and experience with clients that live in these facilities, and it's not uncommon for me to think someone's 80 when they're really in their 90s. And those of us around, even on this call, I'm sure every one of you has a relative or knows someone that is in their 90s. And again, these statistics continue to rise. In fact, in 2016, the chance that someone in an upper middle class couple age 65 would live to 95 was 43%. However, by 2029, that changes to 50%. Now, what's interesting about this study is that this is upper middle class data that was taken from Social Security. So those that do not have the wealth that others have, there are creative solutions in order to help solve for that, but ultimately, preparing in advance, having financial solutions to get there can play a really big role in those of us that are able to live a longer life. So the traditional retirement story narrative is a lifetime of work with a clear end date, often captured by an office retirement party. However, today's retirement story presents life after work as very different. Again, the old story says we've earned that time to relax. We can walk on the beach with sunsets. We can have bicycle ride, a golf course, visit with grandchildren. However, that story, it's not that it's not an incorrect story, but it's woefully incomplete story. So the new retirement story adds a whole nother component. Although the past story fails to capture the differences in the next retirement phase in the context of their life. For example, while there's often a male figure portraying planning for the future, maybe the narrative really, and let me back up, what I'm describing here is what the old narrative was. The new narrative often includes a lot of women who have their own careers. In fact, moreover, women more than men are most likely to be the primary consumer and caregiver of the household. In fact, even in my client meetings, women are much more engaged than even they were 5 and 10 years ago in their financial future and well-being. And it makes women more knowledgeable about what the future demands are as well. So future retirees will often have fewer adult children to provide physical, emotional, social, and financial support in our older age. Even retirees with offspring may find that their adult children live many miles or time zones away. According to Merrill Lynch, the divorce rate for people over the age of 50 has increased over 700% in just 60 years. So unlike past generations, retirement is no longer a relatively brief period at the end of our lives. For those with greater education and income, there is likely to be an even greater period of well-being in retirement, and it gives far more than a walk and an endless beach. So, just to put that into context, a person in their 60s is likely to live an additional 20 to 25% of their life after the age of 60. That's a lot of healthy years ahead of them that probably weren't considered at age 40 or even 50. So let's talk about these 4 phases and the different areas of them within. These 4 phases are the honeymoon phase, the big decision phase, navigating longevity, and then the solo journey phase. And they aren't necessarily in clean breaks, and they aren't necessarily each 8,000 days. And they also could be like a slow transition from one phase into the next phase. And so if we start on talking about the first phase, what I wanted to do is ask you if you have any questions. You can see that I got a little creative in my writing tablet here with my rainbow questions. But you can, again, ask questions in a few ways. As Savannah said, you can either raise your hand or you can just type your question and Savannah can certainly respond to that and I can answer it for you. So you may or may not have a question so far. I'll give you another few seconds to see if anything's come up or you need any more information about what I've talked about. Okay, so let's go to the first phase. The first phase is the honeymoon phase. And this is when we really shift responsibilities. We have a desire to pursue existing or new interests, and additional healthy life years often allow for the more freedom during this stage. And for this reason, we might first see retirement as kind of like this honeymoon stage, and that's not quite your father's retirement. It could be filled with travel, anticipation. In fact, clients that come to me often have a whole list of things that they've been saving up to do for their retirement years. And it can be very busy. However, it can also be balanced with part-time work or employment, maybe transitioning out of your current role into consulting roles or volunteering to remain engaged. And also, I often see transitions for work slowing down but not ending in order to continue supporting loved ones. And that's something we'll talk about a little bit more, but often there's not a clean break in retirement like there was 20 and 30 years ago. So for decades, retirement really has had that clear definition. But today, again, retirement takes a much more ambiguous form. So retirement may mean employment remaining constant, dropping to part-time, or even leading to a career change. I've got several clients right now that are reworking their entire, now I get to do what I've really wanted to do, or along the years of my career, there's 3 or 4 areas of interest that came to mind that I would have liked to have started a small business, but it couldn't afford me that opportunity, and now it does, for example. And the trend is living longer again, as we discussed earlier. So the honeymoon phase is really characterized by resources and the well-being that's compatible to life during, full-time work, and shifting those responsibilities in order to pursue outside interests. It's also the perfect time to anticipate and safeguard against potential decreases in resources, especially through planning. So the gig economy, go back one, please. Yes. So the gig economy really is a labor market characterized by a prevalence of short-term contracts or freelance work. And a lot of these gig economies have come to a halt. But some of them have actually, like Lyft and Uber, have started delivering meals. But what the gig economy does for us, it's flexible. I have a lot of retired clients that we've seen beginning to show interest in these areas, partly because they have the free time and they can devote to a job that they can take at any time or turn it off at any time. The rise in these jobs really is quite profound between the ages of 55 and 74 compared to their counterparts. In fact, 24% of adults between 55 and 74 are working in this alternative type of environment, whereas people 25 to 54 was only about 14%. And again, these tend to be apps that can offer all these varied and job roles that you can turn off and on when you want a vacation or babysitting grandchildren or anything that you're interested in. So when we flip to this really talks about how people, the reasons why they're working in retirement. So almost all retirees who worked for pay in retirement found, that answered this had quite a range of reasons why they did. So the main reason is certainly because they just enjoyed it. They weren't ready to stop. All of a sudden they're at this point where they feel that they've gotten to a point where they can financially change, but they're not ready to financially change. And they also want to stay active. That was another reason that's important, especially for people who have good social environments within their work structure. It's very difficult to step outside of that. 26% said that they wanted additional items and wanted to continue that spending and didn't want to reduce their spending. So continued working in order to do so. Some might have just been offered a different job opportunity. They get to the point at the end of their career where they have all of this information, education, and experience behind them. And now they can take a little jump to maybe a contract work or another job that they might not otherwise have in order to risk losing benefits or what have you. And of course, health insurance, maybe a decrease in investments. Right now, that's a concern. I've got several clients who just retired this year who said, Kelly, am I still okay? And the answer is yes. I mean, a long-term plan should not change when you retire. We should be looking that well into advance. And then just a few people said, I totally want to change my career. And there's also quite a few different careers that are interesting, of interest for people who might be transitioning out of their main career that they've had for years. For example, an adjunct professor. There are more jobs for non-tenure track or adjunct professors. In fact, in 1969, just 21% of college faculty were adjuncts, but in 2015, more than 2/3 were. So quite a big jump for people. And again, it's having all that experience behind you. It could be project-based consulting. Don't be gun shy about looking at this type of opportunity. Often people cannot afford to hire full-time help, but are very interested in contract employers. And the pay can be very good. I mean, anywhere from $50 to $250 an hour to do this type of work. And so often people are able to find this, whether it's through alumni associations or industry groups, different areas where they're reaching out to people that have businesses that might be interested or know of someone who might be interested. Some other areas could be accounting and bookkeeping. So again, often people aren't able to hire a full-time bookkeeper, but want someone to come and assist with books because they don't find or have the time to do that. That's something that I employ personally. And that person is a contract worker who comes into not only my business, but other businesses, and has a lot of experience. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be someone who has a college degree if interested in that, but just enjoys doing that type of work. There's event coordinators or planners. You know, some area that's become really prevalent is a patient advocate, someone who might partner with people, or home health aide, who can really make appointments for clients, fill out insurance or other paperwork, even negotiate costs and medical care. So there are certainly programs that allow you to get certified, but it's not necessary. And then tutoring. This is an area that is quite fulfilling, especially when it comes to older generations helping what I call skip generations, is 2 generations before them. So there's a whole array of areas in which we can tutor, and often it's just a patient ear for someone who's younger than them, and it helps you earn a little bit of extra money. So you know, again, friends that have children that might need tutoring help, because of the time is flexible. Often parents are really happy to have people who are retired who can work at different hours of the day with their students. So there's a lot of benefits to having that retiree as a tutor versus a teacher or someone who might have other obligations. There's also more financial help from parents to adult children. And this is really a key component. You know, this is something that I deal with, I would say probably 30 to 50% of the time with my client base. That it's very common for us to continue helping one or more of our children, either for an intermittent time period or for an extended time period throughout our lives. And this can cause some financial pressure on our plans. And obviously, you can plan for this, but the hope would be that you have a very well outlined plan, and that it doesn't, if at all possible, affect your ability to live a very healthy, independent life. However, I will tell you, about 60% of adults, I mean, I find somewhere between 25 and 50 of my clients, but it's well over 60% that do provide some help. So, and as this slide says, it can go the other way, that 28% of children provide help to parents. So having that kind of intermix of support is quite common, and something that we really need to prepare for as we age. And often the questions that I ask clients is, you know, are you currently supporting, or have you supported your adult children ever? And what were those circumstances that you did? And then really the next questions that I ask are, you know, if you did support them during that time, you were comfortable in doing that? Is that something that you would see yourself, should another situation occur that they need additional assistance? And I find that clients who say yes once have a very difficult time of saying no the next time. And so I do always put some special kind of emergency funds in place should that happen, because obviously we're very emotionally tied to our family, and we want to ensure that they are taken care of. The next phase is the big decision phase. And I'll get to additional questions in just a minute here. But this is an important phase because it's best characterized as more free time. It's often unstated that it's a key time for making big decisions. It takes shape as work really starts fading from our view. And health status may also become less vibrant than it was before. So a second retirement phase does provide opportunity to make or renew social connections. Friends now have more time to socialize and even start traveling together. And work is often replaced by hobbies, volunteering, travel plans, grandparenting, you know, anything like that really starts filling the void of those works. Individuals and couples are confronted with kind of the second retirement phase, often are faced with some tactical questions. And these are really important. For example, now that we're fully retired, should we buy a new car for both transportation and personal reward? Or should we stay in our hometown or move somewhere warmer? Would life be easier if we downsized? Can we afford our current lifestyle for the long term? These are all questions that we begin asking ourselves. And they all have different layers. For example, a client might come to me and say, I don't like to spend money on cars. They're not a good investment. And that is true, but there's another layer to that. For example, if someone is in their 70s and driving a 20-year-old car, a newer model might have safety features that could keep you driving for a longer period of time. For example, lane recognition if someone comes in your lane. There's research being done from MIT Age Lab right now that can detect changes in your retina through a digital screen on your windshield. And it can change if you're not blinking as often as you should. Are you staying awake? Could there be medical conditions? Even sensors on your steering wheel that can detect change in heart rate, change in temperature. And so there's so many different technology advancements that if you are someone who is living independent or living in a facility but still wanting the independence of a car, might become important down the road. So often, even though clients say, I'm buying this car and I'm 65 and it's the last car I'm ever going to buy, I often incorporate another vehicle that's quite expensive down the road in order to accommodate what might be different technologies to help keep us driving longer. So each of these questions that we ask certainly have a lot of critical components to them to address as well. So, also with empty nesters, we face changing housing needs. So the option to downsize actually might be more appealing. In fact, 37% of baby boomers say they plan to move from their current home. That's from the Wall Street Journal that reported that. And many concerns about the cost of home maintenance, proximity to family, access to services, and livability in their existing homes, such as having a master down or something of that sort. There's also changing income. Certainly when we reach that second age of retirement, we often pull in different income sources, so Social Security or pension. Often we start accessing that Roth or IRA that we've been saving into. So we might be living on a higher rate of fixed income than we had previously. And so planning and how to distribute those incomes and take them in a proper manner is really key to these stages of retirement as we get to those stages, I should say. So there's, again, so many questions that we ask. We talked about some of these, but I think what's really important is that we understand and begin to address some of these questions ahead of time so that you can prepare both financially and emotionally from them. Would life be easier if we downsize? Or can we afford our current lifestyle for long term? And I'm going to be adding in a little bit to this presentation to talk a little bit more about these questions. And the reason is, we're in a very interesting time now where we're in our homes, spending a lot of times in our own heads. And I think this is a perfect opportunity for you all out there to ensure, am I putting enough time and effort into some of the questions that I maybe were ignoring or just didn't have the time in my busy days to address earlier. Home maintenance, again, there's so many that aren't even listed on here, but certainly you can see how difficult some of these decisions can make. And there's a lot of places that could work. Certainly Era Living offers a wide range of facilities in order to address independence with people. But a lot of people obviously want to stay at home as long as they can. And what does as long as you can mean? Does that mean until I can't leave the house anymore? Does that mean until I can't garden anymore? Does that mean, there's a whole bunch of what does that mean for each of you that are on this call today. And it's different for everyone. And, what's important in answering those questions will help you take some of the pressure off of what those next steps might be. So I wanted to stop and ask questions. I received this comic from one of my clients during this COVID that I wanted to share with you. So while you guys might be considering a question, either typing a question if you have one or raising your hands, I thought this was quite important on several levels. First of all, this shows, a broad spectrum of ages who are, quarantined with a lot of one thing, but didn't think outside the box to what else they might need. And although this, I have to say, I laughed so hard when I saw this, because when I received it, it was during the time when you couldn't find toilet paper. But what is important to understand is anytime we're dealing with a crisis, we are hyper-focused on a particular crisis moment. In this case, it's toilet paper. However, each of you listening can probably come up with an example or two where a crisis occurred and you hyper-focused on one particular thing. And as a coach, as a financial planner and as a coach, what I find is that a lot of my role is bringing back in the other components that need to be brought in and be addressed. For example, is there food in this case? Or in my case, although we're hyper-focused right now on staying healthy, what does that mean 10 or 20 years from now? So our job is always going to be focused on what's going on globally. And so again, although I think this brings light to something that was such an interesting part of this whole COVID start, it certainly is very parallel to a lot of what I see, and certainly what you guys might have seen. Savannah, is there any questions? Anyone raising their hand?
Not yet.
So far, okay. So, I wanted to add in a little component to this presentation about a few questions. And for those of you that might be taking notes, I do want you to know that I'll be, or I should say Chantel has delivered some packets to Era Living that will be sent to you in the near future if they haven't already. And they'll contain additional information on what we're talking about today, not only about what each of these phases are and more information about them, but also a workbook for you to help begin analyzing what these phases might be. And this is just a starting off point. This takes a long time in order to process this information. But I also did decide with today's call to include these 3 questions and another worksheet. And the reason why I did that is these are 3 questions that I ask all my clients as they're nearing retirement. Who will change my light bulb? How will I get an ice cream cone? And who will I have lunch with? And your reaction might be, what in the world am I talking about? What is she talking about out there? Is she crazy? And although my teenagers might think I am a little crazy, if you bear with me, I'll explain a little bit about what these questions really mean. And so as we go to the next slide, you can see that there's a worksheet. And again, that's my great writing that I put on there. But this is important. When you get this worksheet in the mail, I want you to take some time to really analyze some of these questions. So the first question is, who will change my light bulb? And really that's designed to address all these different components about what living in the home and being independent means to you. Am I able to care for my needs in my home? And then how will I get an ice cream cone? In other words, a lot of that's about transportation. How will I get to that place that brings me joy? How will I get to the Bellevue Botanical Gardens or the Seattle Aquarium or the Pike Place Market? Things that I really have enjoyed throughout my life. Am I going to have to stop doing those things? And then the last question is, who will I have lunch with? So that's about socialization, which is, again, one of the key components that we're going to talk about a little bit later in this presentation. And for example, I wanted to tell you a little bit about how I viewed these questions. And the reason why I brought this in during this COVID crisis is because I wanted you to understand that this is really an opportune time for you all out there to to consider what changes you're addressing during this. And there's a few really good examples. One that I'm going to start with is that you're on a Zoom call today. And that's something to be really proud of. In fact, over the past month, I've had dozens and dozens of client meetings over Zoom calls. There's been only one client that was the couple tried, but was unable to get on Zoom. And I find that very phenomenal, because when I talk to working adults, and especially younger people, their adaptability in some areas is still being encouraged in that youth. Whereas even though we say, okay, I'm 50, 60, 70, 80, I don't want to change. I'm not into all that new fancy stuff. Well, the truth is you have and you are, so congratulations. And what that also tells you is what you might be capable of down the road. But some considerations that I have taken personally when in the last month is exercising, for example. I walk several miles a day. However, I have found that I'm unable to exercise outside of walking without someone saying, Kelly, it's time to do it now. And so for me, exercise is such a key component of long-term health that I need to look forward to my future 10, 20, 30 years from now to ensure that I've got a cheerleader helping to ensure that I can stay strong, not just get outside and do a little walking. So for me, that will absolutely be in a community that offers those types of resources. Another one is my nails. You might not be able to see them, but there's no fancy color on them right now. So on my 25th anniversary, I treated myself to, since my husband and I were going on a trip, to having gel nail polish put on. And I thought, this is the best thing ever. I'm going every 2 weeks and I'm having my nails done. Now, am I going to be able to go and do that when I'm 80? Maybe I can get a driver to do that. Maybe I can live in a community that has a salon that can provide that. But what I have found is, the color's almost gone and I don't miss it. So I'm just keeping them a lot shorter. And I know this sounds silly, but it's a time for me to analyze what kind of components or what type of components are going to be important to me at that next stage in my life. So again, I guess the last thing that I will mention, and this comes in who will change my light bulb, is anyone that knows me knows that I'm an avid gardener. Our yard, well, let's put it this way. There's a lot of hours put into my garden. And what I love most is, moving the same plant 5 times that I've already moved before, or sharing plants with others, or bringing flowers to any place that I go. And when I'm unable or not feeling well and not strong enough to get out there and provide that, I do not enjoy it when someone else does my yard. What I find is that it's not just the beauty of the garden that I enjoy, it's getting into the garden myself. So for me, living in a residence, my current residence, may not be something that I will see myself doing 30 years from now. Because I'd be the one directing, nope, that plant goes that, nope, a little more to the right, nope, move that, what I would become as a director instead of a place that would bring me peace and enjoyment. So again, these are all things that I'm kind of uncovering in myself. They take time to do, but certainly, even though those are my examples, I'm sure that you have many in each of your own lives of areas that you can kind of look forward and see that they might become problematic or need alterations. And that's what this worksheet is designed to do. And if you need more assistance, there's another piece that I didn't include that explains these questions better, and I'm happy to email or send that to you if you reach me. Okay, so as we move on, we go to the third, which is called Navigating Longevity Phase. And this is a really complex, probably one of the most complex stages in these 8,000 day stages of our lives. The logistics of health management may become a full-time job with increased medical appointments, medical management, and increased mobility changes. And also the spending per capita increases steeply after the age of 65 for medical. It's estimated that 92% of older adults are managing at least one chronic condition, and 77% are managing complexities of 2 or more chronic conditions. And that's from the National Council of Aging. So chronic conditions can make handling other issues more difficult, and just health in general, and often can become mismanaged. So for example, what may seem like a straightforward routine, medication adherence, becomes a key and challenging aspect of managing health. So a look at the numbers show how increased age leads to juggling more medications. In fact, 3 out of 4 adults over the age of 50 take more than one prescriptive medication on a regular basis. In fact, 86% of those aged 65 and above regularly take prescriptions, with 53% taking 4 or more on a regular basis. And also, due to changes in health, individuals or as a couple, social well-being may change. And so there's fewer opportunities to join friend groups, and family may or may not be available to help with that. In addition, friends in the same cohort of you are managing their own conditions. In fact, I laugh when I hear people say, you know, everyone that I know, we're all talking about the same problems. We're all talking about what new medication they're on, or how they couldn't get out of bed without aches and pains. And again, all of these things become challenges that really occupy so much of our mental capacity. And it also, then we have this whole complexity around suitable housing or occasional daily assistance from family members or friends to run routine errands and maintain the home. So while many legal affairs haven't really started to come into play at this stage yet, like a healthcare power of attorney or proxy, this phase of retirement often highlights the growing importance that legal contingencies that we do establish are available when we're able to and need to access them. So in such scenarios, really trusted people need to be selected in order to make these decisions. And this can change over time. I mean, often I'll have a client who has one trusted party, but then changes based on their situations. I know when my children were young, I had named, my husband and I had named a sister as the main, person should we pass away. The problem is she had twin boys, and one of them was diagnosed with autism at a young age, and she was quite busy managing that schedule. And I realized that her taking on my 2 boys with her current lifestyle was no longer a valid option for me. So we had to change. So it's important that we dig those out. We're reviewing them on a regular basis to ensure that what we desire to take place can actually occur. And then as we move on, what we can see here is what happens as we age and what becomes more and more important to us as we age. So what this diagram is showing here is that as we're younger and really up until retirement, our financial considerations are the top concern, and then it's medical, housing, isolation, and of course, brain cognitive impairment. And then as we retire, now we're dealing with medical concerns, cognitive impairment, and then of course, our financial abilities or inabilities per se. So the older we get, it's very important to identify what's going to be important to how things change. And that's also why, Chantel, if you could just go back a slide, that's also why as people, often come to me as a financial advisor in their 50s and 60s pre-retirement, and they say, you know what, I just don't want to do this anymore. At work, I was managing my expenses. I had everything on bill pay. But now I worry, am I investing correctly? Can I afford the things that I needed? And it's not that the financial matters aren't as important as they were, but the concerns start switching. And that's where a coach like myself might come into play. And it's much more important to either validate or help address some of those concerns that are constantly changing. Okay. So now as we go along, we can also see that as we age, and you can see how time goes on, how our lives become much more complicated. So whether it's social contact, issues, transportation, health compliance, healthcare, cooking, cleaning, bathing, dressing, even the administration of health, our lives become much more complex. And it's also really important to understand that we're only given so much mental capacity, and we can think of it as a pie. I had a clinical psychologist or slash coach teach me a little bit about this at one point, because what happens is we're given this mental capacity that does not expand. So if I'm spending a majority of my time cooking and cleaning, I'm unable to now manage my medications as well. If I'm worrying about managing transportation, then I'm going to be unable or have the time in order to do those repairs on the house that I thought I would. If I am trying to make sure that I'm getting to my medical appointments and I'm taking notes and trying to keep up on the most important data and getting second opinions, I'm then not going to be able to spend as much time with my friends. So as we age and our lives become more complex, that pie won't grow. You'll just be less effective in certain areas. And that's where kind of the wheels start falling off the bus, per se, and we need to ensure that we're getting additional support for the areas that we are unable or unwilling to continue to put as much effort and interest in. So then as we move on, what's also helpful to understand is as we understand what caregiving does, we can see that there's a lot of components to it that can take a lot of pressure off what we're doing. And this is just some of the responsibility that caregivers hold. So at first, caregiving to us might look like a periodic, maybe a simple phone call or check-ins to maintain social contact, but keeping people independent. An older loved one may need to be reminded to refill prescriptions or take medications on time, and is it the correct dose with the appropriate meal? Over time, these tasks may emerge, such as providing transportation to the doctor's office or sitting in on the appointments to ensure that information is received properly. Even in-home maintenance, just as changing a light bulb. That's a question that I asked earlier on that worksheet. And in many instances, caregivers can serve as a healthcare advocate or intermediary, speaking with doctors, pharmacists. Caregivers can also provide assistance with financial responsibilities like paying bills or balancing household checkbooks, especially in situations as cognitive abilities could decline. And then we have the beginning of physical frailty and limitations that can require caregivers to even begin helping with daily activities. And this is not meant to be a negative, that just the whole world falls apart. This is more as an identification process to say, there will be a time that we will need these things. Very few of us just don't wake up one morning. And so as we begin to need more and more care, who and how do you want to receive this care? Do you want it to be in your home? Do you want it to be in an environment where care can come in discreetly and then exit discreetly? So there's a lot of considerations, and that's why it's so important when we looked at those different housing, when we saw that graph of just different housing options, that you look at each option without ruling anything out to help you form better opinions and understand that. So then the last stage is what we call the solo journey phase. That's when health or physical issues really quickly come to a forefront and abrupt. It's a single catastrophic event, such as a fall or a stroke, and it can immediately change the needs and our lifestyle. Serious illness, disability, or death of a spouse will greatly impact the well-being and risk of the entire household. Oftentimes, the loss of a spouse opens a door, however, for many to begin again and really renew their lives and reinvent themselves during this final phase of retirement. So despite these upheavals that will occur, people who are on their solo journeys often report having the greatest sense of well-being. And so, this solo journey phase also can include you kind of stepping back to those other areas of retirement that we previously visited. 65%, over the age of 65, a dramatic number of people live alone. In fact, there's 13.3 million, or 29%, of those people who aren't already in a facility that lived alone. That represented 35% of women and 20% of men. And it dramatically increases with advanced age. So for example, almost half of people over the age of 75 live alone. And so again, it's all those questions, those three questions that I ask. How will I change a light bulb? Who will get an ice cream? Who will I have lunch with? All of those questions, again, are really important. It's also, as I mentioned, not uncommon to revisit these. So you can see that someone who's entered the solo journey phase might get right back to that big decision phase. And where am I going to live now? How am I going to incorporate social well-being into my life when my spouse was my primary social companion? So again, this phase will often put you back and revisit some of those earlier phases. So the social activity is really key during this solo journey phase. And I think most of you, or all of you on this call, completely understand that in this COVID pandemic that we're experiencing. That first week might have been, oh, this is really kind of nice and quiet, or at least it was at my house. And then I was like, wait a minute, I miss my son and his wife. And wait a minute, we're supposed to share a bottle of wine with the neighbors. We can't do that now. And so again, there's been a lot of research on this, but this has been the impact of COVID, I hope, gets you all thinking as to how you might move forward should something else happen to you personally versus being put on you through what we're going on in this current pandemic crisis. And what this study shows, this is quite pertinent, and I find this to be one of my favorites, because what social activity it plays a big role in our motor skills. In fact, a study by this neurologist at Rush University looked at over 900 seniors at average age 80 over a 5-year period of time. And this study revealed that with increased social activity was an adeptness in a range of physical tasks, including walking a straight line, standing on one leg, on tiptoes, turning a full circle without falling, and even placing pegs in a board. And what they did is they were able to ask how many times a week or a day or a year people did a number of things. For example, going to restaurants, sporting events, playing bingo, going on day trips or overnight trips, doing unpaid community or volunteer work, visiting relatives or friends, even participating in groups such as Senior Knights of Columbus, Rosary Society or something similar, and or attending church and religious services. So each activity was rated on this 5-point scale, with 1 indicating participation in the activity once or less per year, 2 is several times a year, 3 is several times a month, 4 is several times a week, and 5 is almost every day. And what they found is with each 1-point drop, from 3 to 2, for example, was a decrease in 33% of your overall score in ability to walk a straight line, stand on one leg, on tiptoes, turn around full circle, all of that, again, motor skills that are so important. So social interaction should be up there on your decision list of where do I go next? What's the best environment for me in order to maintain this type of health and social welfare? So also what I find is really interesting, and of course, because I spend quite a bit of time reading on longevity and longevity planning, is I find that more and more people are actually peaking in their later years. And the most important when it comes to cognitive impairment is right here. In fact, this study showed, and it's from a Business Insider study, showed that psychological well-being actually peaked at age 82. It wasn't at 25 or 18 in college or, 50 when your kids are finally out of the house. That psychological well-being actually continues to get better and better into our early ages. And this is also one of the main reasons why I feel that if you can place yourself in an environment to support your needs, that psychological well-being can continue to grow and give back to others. And again, really, really important. In fact, when I remember times in my 30s and 40s, and for those of you that had children or nieces and nephews that you were close to, you can understand that as your children are in middle school and high school, my emotional well-being was not in a great place. I'm not sure about you guys out there, but there was a lot of days where I was like, oh, what am I doing wrong? Is he ever gonna be independent? And those that have lived through that are the very best people. The very best people to go to and say, for example, my mother-in-law and my mother, I would say, how did you get through it? And they're like, well, you just stop worrying and it kind of happens. Just keep showing them love and support. And, that's the encouragement that I needed for my own well-being down there, down in those earlier decades. And so as we age, I think it's imperative that we put ourselves again into an environment that we can live independently and healthily so that we can continue to participate in lives of younger people. It's really a gift that we can give them. So as we consider how to embrace these 8,000 days and these 4 stages, there's several things to consider. First of all, once we have an understanding of what these costs might be, we have to understand, even I should say prior to knowing what the costs are, we have to know, what do I want to do in retirement? And again, that workbook that you will get will help you determine what areas of these 8,000 days and what's that next area and how do I achieve that? And then with that comes a layer of, how do I afford it? Where's the best place to get that money? Is to get it from a taxable account, or do I want to get it from outside resources? Do I pull money from my home? Do I access other funds? Do I have insurance policies that are permanent that can refill that bucket should I need care and my spouse still need those monies that were used for my care if I don't have long-term care? So there's a whole lot that goes into the complexities around what your story will cost you. But again, things to consider is just one stage at a time with a continued forward thought pattern. It's not all about toilet paper, right? There's a lot of other components that we need to look forward to, and what's going on around us that need to be incorporated. And so as we get closer to the end of this, and I think I'm getting close on my time, I just have a slide or 2 left. I wanted to, again, with my horrible writing, I wanted you to understand a little bit about what's going on in the economic nature, and just take a step back from this 8,000 days presentation to what I'm seeing in my career as an investment and wealth manager. And one of the most important components that I will tell you is that I really want you to balance your exposure to what you guys are listening to out there. That it's very easy, especially when we are sitting with a TV as our entertainment, to get drawn into any particular TV channel. It doesn't matter if you sit on the right or the left or somewhere in the independent side. There's a lot of information that we're receiving, and it's often a lot of negative information. And I will tell you that anytime we're in a recession, some say it could become a depression, but either way, in an economic crisis, there is a lot of considerations. And some of the main considerations that I continue to pay attention to are the jobs, which often can equal housing crisis, which we've already experienced in the past few decades. And some say we may see that again. Then we're also dealing with a trade war and oil. and oil situation. So it's really nice to fill your gas tank up right now. However, that can mean for a longer term, I would say a longer recovery is the best way to put it. And so what I caution you all to do is to know that there is nothing that's going on now that's going to recover quickly. That what we're seeing right now is, I call it unguarded investor optimism, meaning we're seeing these swings in the market. Yesterday, we saw a huge upswing over a very bad week last week. And so we're going to continue seeing these. But most often what we do see in these crises is we'll see a large downturn with an unguarded optimism, and then another downturn prior to our rebound. And we haven't seen that downturn yet. So I caution you that we very well could be experiencing that. I'm not giving you advice whether to sell it with my clients. We're staying the course that we've always had for them. However, from an emotional perspective, I want you guys to understand that when this easing, government easing comes to an end, we may very well see a whole nother layer of compromise on our systems on every level. And so we just need to continue to stay healthy. We need to continue to follow a good plan. And as with all and every economic crisis in the history of time, it's usually about a 2-year turnaround at the most. So some are quite quick, some are 6 months to a year, but in all circumstances, it's never been more than 2 years. So, it's just an interesting ride. I guess that's a word that I choose to use because I live in this world. For some of you out there, it might be quite terrifying. Again, I ask if you find yourself repeating, thoughts of very distraught, economic concerns, that you either find someone to determine, a coach, either a financial advisor or a planner that you can talk through that with to determine if there is a reason for your concern, or just turn the TV off, watch something different for a while to help with that state of anxiety. And then it's just summarizing. So what we've talked about is the different stages and how it's really up to you to reinvent them and what that means for you. And also just to pay attention to the balance of what you have left. When we're in our 60s, we could have several decades left, again, about 25% of your retirement. And so I think what's really important is that you begin to look forward to each of those next phases with excitement, because there is so much more available to us than what was available for my grandparents and past generations. So much good there is. And I'll end with another quote from Dr. Coughlin. What he says is the four retirements enable clear vision to plan and anticipate what is likely to come. Effective preparation can thereby reduce the stress of uncertainty and boost your prolonged independence and control in life that so many of us wish to lead tomorrow. So again, it's a beautiful saying, because so many of us, when we get nervous, tend to ignore what's in front of us. And the opposite of that is just really facing it head on, creating a plan, running it by a coach, and then working your way through it, because plans become very effective with an outline in place. And so the next steps really for you guys are, you're going to be receiving a packet of information in the mail. And when you do, there will be several worksheets. One will look like the one that you see on the screen. And then also it will include a workbook for you to begin answering some of those questions. And as I mentioned, I did include those 3 questions: the ice cream cone, light bulb question, and who I have lunch with. So that worksheet will also be in there. Feel free to ask any questions that you have. And again, reach out to a financial professional on how to plan for these phases, and or if you're finding that you have a lot of concerns about what's going on, especially right now. Okay, so this is now a time if you have any other questions that I might be able to answer for you. hopefully that you guys were able to gather some information that came from, what I shared. So we'll give a little bit more time in case anyone wants to raise your hand. I've also included the link to my website where you can access information if you have any personal questions or things that maybe you didn't want to address via this format. I'm happy to answer those questions for you as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Kelly. If you still do have a question, feel free to continue typing it while I wrap up here. But Kelly, we really appreciate your time today and all the information that you shared on the financial planning webinar. And as you mentioned, we have already mailed out those packets of information along with the workbook. So you can expect those in your mailbox sometime this week or early next week. And then I will also be sending you an email along with Kelly's contact information and a short survey that we would like you to fill out to tell us about your experience on the Zoom call today. We'd love to hear from you what worked well, what didn't, and your overall thoughts so that we can make this the best experience possible. So, and if you would like to get in contact with us here at University House Issaquah, you can either reply to the email that I will be sending you shortly, or you can reach us by phone. And the phone number here is 425-557-4200. Okay, and we'll just wait just a couple more seconds to see if there's any questions coming through. Okay, I haven't heard any questions. Feel free to email them in after the presentation if you do have any. And thank you so much for attending the financial planning webinar today.